Today, our Torah portion is on Bereshit, and the message is brought today by Mauricio Quintero. Thank you, Mauricio, for this beautiful message that we're going to hear today. Understanding our origins helps us to understand our present better. The past leaves us with stories that allow us to grow and to improve through experience. Parashat Bereshit is so rich in light of the four basic levels of interpretation. The first is pshat, which is the literal. Remez, allegorical or a hint. Drash, the interpretation, which is what we hear today. And sod, the mystical. These allow thousands of messages to be derived from each and every verse. Bereshit comes from the words be, meaning in or within, reshit, first, from the same root as rosh, head, beginning or principle. Thus it follows that Bereshit is the beginning of all creation. This parasha contains a variety of topics: the creation of our physical world, our solar system, our planet, our light, the universe, and all the animals, culminating in a unique creation, the human being. Next comes the creation of Shabbat, the day of rest. And we see how everything was created to generate life, to be blessed, and to enable us to rejoice and admire God's handiwork. Later, it will recount how man was created androgynous. And at a certain point, God separated man's female aspect from his male, the masculine, stating that it was not good for man to be alone. Then man's purpose in the garden, created by God, is revealed: to care for it, cultivate it, and subdue it. Now man and woman are instructed not to eat any fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then one day a talking serpent appears to the woman, who had not yet been named Eve. She takes the fruit she had been instructed not to eat and eats it. She does not stop there, but shares it with her husband, who also eats it, thus committing the first sin of the world, disobedience. As a result of this action, they are expelled from the Garden of Eden and sentenced. Now human beings would return to the dust, not that we will die, but that we will eat our daily bread in pain, as well as give birth in pain. The story ends with them being expelled from the garden, no longer having unrestricted access to the tree of life. As a consequence of their actions, the story of their sons, Cain and Abel, now outside Eden, culminates in humanity's first murder. The cause? Envy and violence. Thus begins the degradation of humankind through the descendants of Cain and Seth. The cycles of life and death of each descendant are recounted, reaffirming the eternal sentence in the initial chapters. All return to the earth, regardless of their age. The story then takes a turn. As humanity develops as a society, it requires more knowledge of good and evil. The fear or the reverence of God disappears, and it becomes corrupt, to the point that God decides to wipe out all living beings with a flood. Now, a renewed humanity should have emerged through the only surviving family, Noah and his sons and their families. However, these men also become corrupt. And this is how the sons of Noah appear. Noah was dishonored by his son Ham, and men who supplanted God, such as Nimrod, appear for the first time. The human race attempts to surpass God and builds a tower, which is destroyed by the human hand. Once again, man is dispersed across the globe, and languages are established. The parasha ends by offering humanity hope through Shem's descendants, preparing the way for the story of Abraham's introduction. I want to address a topic that arose about 2 weeks ago when I was listening to a presentation on climate change. The speaker discussed the roles and worldviews of various cultures in caring for the planet, beginning with an investigation of humanity's role on Earth and our responsibility for it. While it's true that humanity's role in the environment wasn't the central theme, its opening premise got me thinking. He began by describing how the northern tribes of the continent, they were called Haida and Sioux, taught that their primary role was to be protectors and guardians of the natural and spiritual order, manifesting itself in a deep relationship with nature, the worship of spirits, and the belief that both human and animals are interrelated and sacred. From this perspective, they emphasize their role as environmental protectors, their respect for nature and community responsibility, with specific separate roles for men and women. They also believe that nature's elements, such as wind, water, plants, and animals, possess their own spirit and personality, that in renewable cycles, the earth acts as a mother, and that before using her resources, permission must be sought through ceremonies and rituals. Then I began researching what's called the Popol Vuh. These are sacred texts of the Quiche Mayans of Guatemala, which tells us that humans were created several times, starting from clay, but ultimately emerging from corn, so they could worship and feed the gods through their offerings. Humans were part of a larger system called Kanan Ulyu, or Mother Earth, and all things, living or non-living, have a spirit and deserve respect. There's a cosmic order with various levels, heaven, earth, and the underworld, interconnected by the sacred Seba tree. Humans were created to speak to the gods and maintain cosmic order through rituals, offerings, and thanksgiving. In the same way, the Incas and the Quichuas believed that Viracocha created the world, formed man from clay, and that his role was to respect moral and natural laws in reciprocity with Pachamama, Mother Earth. Life is reciprocal, such that what is taken from the earth must be returned. In general, all Amerindian religions share a common understanding that creation is a cyclical process carried out by the gods, that nature has its own living soul, and that man's role is to balance the spiritual and material worlds. He must live in gratitude and respectfully repay nature for providing what is necessary for his sustenance. Man's purpose is to maintain the balance between the gods, nature, and community. But the reason for my drash today comes from the Catholic translation of Genesis 1, verse 28, that says, God blessed them, saying to them, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and have her submit. Why? Because he said, I had trouble reading the Western Judeo-Christian version because everyone else seeks harmony. But this speaks to us about filling and subduing without giving anything in return. Then his presentation followed with, which I love, by the way, but I was left with this thorn in my side. I wanted to explain what the Torah says about this in the midst of this progressive world today, with ecological values of supposed defenders of this planet protesting against non-existent genocides. Before Genesis 1:28, verse 26 says, "And God said, let us make humankind, Adam, in our image, B'Tsalmenu, in our likeness, Kidmutenu." Notice that humankind had not yet been contaminated by disobedience. But God desires for us to possess his characteristics within us. If we begin with the premise that God is not matter, nor created from matter, we cannot reproduce him in the likeness of man, but we can recreate those ethereal characteristics. Until this verse, God had manifested himself, demonstrating characteristics such as love, governance, creativity, life, logic, and order, a being who blesses what he does, among others. So in 128, God would not hand the world over to an irrational animal, but to one who emulated his characteristics. Verse 27 says, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." Here again, he reaffirms his plan and carries it out. One thing that we see from God is that he does what he says he will do. Then verse 28 says, "And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth, and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." The key words that interest me here are to subdue, v'chishvuah, and dominate, urdu. Right now, today, is the Hebrew God so evil that he would order us toward our self-destruction? Radu, dominate, implies responsible leadership. It does not refer to exploitation. In the Hebrew Bible, depending upon the context, it implies ordained authority to carry out a function. We see how it appears in Bereshit 9:2 when it says, "Every living thing that moves on the land will be given to them, and they will rule, Radu, over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the sky, and every living thing that moves on the ground." However, it also can be used in other contexts, such as during the reign of Solomon in 1 Kings 4:4, where it says, "Solomon ruled, Radah, over the kings from the river to the land of the Philistine." Or in Exodus 1:8-14, which refers to the subjugation of Israel by the Egyptians. V'chishvuah, conquer or subdue it, in this paragraph does not refer to military conquest, but rather to bringing order to the earth, to a relationship in which mankind, gifted with God's image, must emulate it by taking care of the garden that God gave us. From there we connect Genesis 2:15. God persuaded the man to enter the garden and placed him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and take care of it. Unlike other cultures, it seems that God gave man that responsibility from the moment he endowed him with the ability to decide. And it is man, not Mother Nature, who must answer for the proper care and administration of the asset that God gave him, the earth. So we are given this work as a spiritual purpose, and we cannot be idle. The words used are leavda, meaning to work, and ul shomra, like shomer, to guard. But doesn't it say that the garden miraculously produced its fruit on its own? Why does it say to work? Well, Bereshit Rabbah 16:5 says that leavda, to work it, and ul shomra, to guard it, not only refer to physical cultivation, but to fulfilling the commandments. So we were not slaves. Instead, we were placed in the garden as God's servants to maintain its balance. Rabbi Hirsch offers the following insight. If a person cultivates the ground without observing its limits, he destroys the garden. If he keeps it without cultivating it, he makes it barren. So man was meant to serve the garden, not to exploit it. This idea, previously described, is very applicable to us today. We are all an Eden, a soul that is a microcosm. From the moment we are born, we are in a state of balance between both worlds. As we develop, we come to know good and evil and experience pain and effort. This is where God's command to us, leavda, work, ushomra, guard, makes sense. Are we cultivating our land, our soul? Are we protecting it? Are we reaping chaos, imbalance, and destruction? Today's actions define tomorrow's results, destruction or spiritual sterility. We read that upon being expelled, man stopped caring for and cultivating his soul, causing an imbalance in the created world. Man, who was supposed to have been designed to use his power, his creative strength, his desire to serve God and maintain harmony, had now created a rupture in keeping these commandments. We see how Cain cultivated but did not guard the land. That is, his work was selfish and disconnected from divine service. He embodied leavda without ulshamra, action without restraint. We see how Abel guarded shomer, his flock, but he didn't transform the world. It was barren, representing ulshomra without leavda, care without productivity. As a consequence, Cain killed Abel. It was the triumph of dominion without ethics. So Abel's shed blood symbolizes cultivation without care. In chapter 6, 11 to 12, it says, "And the land became corrupt before God, and the land was filled with violence, Hamas, robbery." So humanity cultivated the world through action, power, and expansion, but completely lost its shomer, guarding. That is, setting limits, exercising justice, and practicing restraint. Thus the world returned to a formless and empty earth, tohu vavohu, as it was at the beginning of creation. The cosmos regressed to chaos. The Tanhuma Noah Shiman 12 summarizes the idea that when man abuses the dominion given him over the earth itself rises against him. Let me conclude with the imbalance of post-flood man. Noah planted a vineyard. He cultivated it, but he didn't take care of it. This resulted in drunkenness, nakedness, and family shame. Again, God told man upon leaving the ark, take care and guard. But instead, he generated an imbalance. Noah cared for creation, but did not exercise the creative force, cultivation after the flood, leaving it barren. So man built a tower to establish governance, cultivate, but did not take care of it or guard it, thereby giving rise to the God-man Nimrod. This is why I believe Abraham was chosen. He returned to the commandment to care, chesed, ul-shomra, and to serve, le'avda, which translates into blessing. Now I can firmly say that the Torah, taken out of context, is meaningless. But with the right spirit, it is a tree of life for humanity, for those who take hold of it. Therefore, the speaker's vision fell short of the Torah's richness. Shabbat Shalom.